Hi, so my name is Aaron Mundell, and this is my writing case study. So, for my analysis of student writing, I created to begin with a quick little writing scale based on some of my student struggles. So, my student struggles with, in particular, spelling, punctuation, and sentence structure. And throughout my case study, that is going to be kind of what I focus on working on with my student. And so for each of these, beginning with spelling, I put for description, the student shows correct spelling of words within their writing. And then I allowed for 5 potential points and the amount of points that are earned following based on each of, I ended up showcasing 3 different writings, each one within one of the times that I met with the student. So the next spot says punctuation, where for the description, the student shows correct punctuation, incorporating commas, periods, question marks, etc. Any correct sort of punctuation the student has. And then my final little category was sentence structure. So I want to ensure that the student is creating complete sentences with proper capitalization at the beginning of each sentence and ensuring to capitalize proper names, locations, places, things like that. And again, both of these categories are worth 5 points, totaling the student's maximum amount of points they could earn through this writing scale at 15. So, some of the things that I will point out about the student is the student is within 8th grade. The student struggles when tasked with bigger writing assessments. So the first time that I sat down with the student, I will talk about a little later how he performs in terms of bigger writing. So writing like essays or journals, anything along the lines of a more than like 4 to 5 sentences, the student begins to shut down and becomes very overwhelmed and doesn't end up really writing anything, just kind of stares at a blank piece of paper. So the student commonly struggles with spelling, punctuation, and creating complete sentences, like I stated in my little analysis. And the student does perform very well at summarizing readings, writing comprehension, answering short answer writing assessments, and including supporting details within his writing. So the student is very strong at performing short answer questions and reading and answering questions about an article. So that kind of tended to be the majority of what I focused on with the student because that's what he was the most comfortable with. So for the conference process, the first conference that I had with him, I gave him this reading and short answer questions. So the article was What was 9/11? The student was able to read, highlight where he found some of the answers within his reading, and then there was 6 short answer questions below that followed. Within the 6 short answer questions, it was common that the student kind of had some spelling mistakes and he struggled to provide proper punctuation amongst some of his writings. For example, it stated in the directions question 2 through 6 should be written in complete sentences. So for question 2, the student didn't provide a complete sentence. He just placed a name. However, he did provide correct capitalization for Osama bin Laden. And the student, like I said, had some misspellings, such as Afghanistan. He spelled important wrong. He also put also by year, you might, and he spelled might wrong. So the student did have some spelling errors within the article. So I sat down reviewing this reading and writing, and We reviewed the writing activity together where I was able to point out areas of needed improvement. So we discussed some of the spelling, the punctuation, and creating complete sentences. The student, again, this is where I had that conversation with him, and he was able to express how he gets kind of concerned with the idea of large scale writing. So the last question that was on this assignment did ask for the student to write 3 sentences. However, the student did write those 3 sentences. It seemed as though if we went any larger than that is when he began to kind of become overwhelmed. So we stuck with the 3 sentence for that. And we discussed completing writing assignments virtually, where a fellow teacher and I were discussing, and they stated that this could assist with the spelling issue, allowing for the student to utilize spell check. I know it's not a great solution for long term. However, just having the student access to seeing how certain words that they're commonly using are spelled correctly can improve their spelling overall and allow for them to eventually naturally start spelling the words correctly. So I ended up doing some research after this, and Graham Harris and Korzempa 2002 did state that students in the spelling condition learned most of the spelling words that they studied on the spelling unit test administered at the end of each unit. They spelled 89% of the words correctly. So with this understanding, me and the student did discuss the idea of implementing some vocabulary quizzes where I will provide the term and the definition, and the student will write down the term. So he's not only understanding certain vocabulary terms and what they mean, he's also practicing spelling those terms correctly because we go over them in the correct spelling and pronunciation of each term. And I kind of focused on terms that were commonly used in articles and ones that he would be incorporating within his writing in the future. So for my scale, my analysis on this first writing, I ended up giving him a total score of 8 out of 15. The student did okay with his spelling. He definitely had some spelling errors. And for punctuation, again, there was quite a few grammatical errors in that sense where the student wasn't putting periods, commas, or any real punctuation that was needed within his writing. And then for creating sentence structure, there was definitely quite a few sentences that were not full sentences, like just writing Osama bin Laden rather than making a complete sentence like he was supposed to. And the student struggled with some capitalization and beginning of sentences and with some names within sentences. So for our second meeting, the student and I took that idea of him struggling to write large scale projects, and I allowed for him to use this reading where you are summarizing the main ideas, which is something that he has as a significant strength, and his strength of adding supporting details. And I broke down the reading, so he was adding some quick, short sentences rather than a large scale paragraph based on the reading. However, the student was still able to write for multiple different aspects of the reading. So I felt this was a good way to incorporate a lot of writing for him, however, making it less overwhelming in a sense. So reviewing this again, it seemed that the student, as we looked at the writing, it was split, like I said, to help minimize the student's feelings of overwhelming large-scale writing. The student did show comprehension of the article and supporting details. Like I said, the student expressed comfortability with the article being broken up. He did say that helped him feel more comfortable writing, where he wasn't trying to focus on multiple aspects of the reading. However, it was broken up and easier for him to follow. Um, the teacher, me, modeled proofreading with the student after this. So within Tang Per Poon 2008, it states that student writers will not only discover new ideas and language forms to express their ideas in writing, but also focus on the appropriate use of vocabulary, layout, grammar, and mechanics. So within this article, the student did struggle to incorporate lots of proper grammar and punctuation. So this is where I implemented the idea for the student of going back and proofreading his writing. I modeled this with him. We looked over this and we went through the reading and his specific writing and we proofread it again out loud where he could verbally hear his mistakes throughout it. And we also were able to show through this that he lacked certain punctuation that was needed. So in terms of the scale for this assessment, he performed a 1 for spelling. There was a multitude of spelling errors within this writing. The punctuation, again, he lacked a lot of punctuation. There was no periods in a lot of his sentences. However, for sentence structure, he did create complete sentences with complex ideas within the sentences, and he did a good job of capitalizing the beginning of sentences. However, he just failed to add periods for most of the end of sentences. So for my last meeting, meeting number 3, we had again kind of followed that same format. So if we look at this reading, however, I didn't break it down as much this time for him. There was a short reading and then a multitude of questions where it still allowed the students to not write so much at once with a big like essay. It was broken down and easier for him to answer specific questions short term. So the student going through this article, I did notice that his answers, well, to begin with, he did a good job of highlighting the answers of where he found them within his articles. And he did fairly well going through this article at creating complete sentences, adding proper punctuation and capitalization throughout the article. If we look, he underneath what tactics were being used by the management owners, he even highlights specific court cases correctly, capitalizing them. He capitalized Pullman correctly. He did a good job in this article. So when we reviewed this third writing activity, this is where I noticed the student's punctuation had improved greatly. The student did express to me that he implemented that proofreading after he completed this assignment. He went back in and he was able to fix multiple errors within his writing. He told me that he went in and realized a lot of his sentences didn't end with periods or punctuation at all. So he was able to go back in and implement these. Also, he went in rereading and was able to fix a multiple incorrect spelling errors. So he said that something that helped him while proofreading was the spell check that I told him to initiate after that teacher had suggested that to me. And finally, the words that were used in practice during the vocabulary quizzes, some of which he did use and incorporate within his writing for this assignment. And I did notice that these words seem to be written properly, whether he wrote them properly based on the quizzes and practice through that, or if it was from proofreading or spell check, I'm not really sure. So for this article, I did score it as a 4 for all categories. He got a 4 in spelling, a 4 in punctuation, and a 4 in sentence structure. I think that overall he progressed and improved significantly, and he is still made some small mistakes in terms of spelling. There was like one or two words that was spelled wrong in this example, and there was maybe one or two small punctuational errors in sentence structure. Again, I think he miscapitalized a couple sentences. However, it still was a great improvement compared to the last few articles. So overall, I think in terms of the student continuing and moving forward, I think it'll be of great practice and success for him to continue to proofread and use that strategy that was taught to him. I hope that the student continues to use this. He showed significant growth with proofreading in terms of his grammatical errors, punctuation after reading. The vocabulary quizzes, I have seen when I would give him those, although it would be almost like in a take it out the door kind of fashion. He began to, whether it was from practice writing the same words or just memorizing them, he was able to kind of understand those words and the spelling of them, and he did grow stronger in terms of those through practice. The spell check, I feel as though it can be beneficial for him to continue to use. I don't want it to be something that he relies on overall. He has used Google Doc when he was completing these assignments, and he was able to have that small assistance on certain grammatical errors where it would provide him the proper spelling of certain things. And like I said, to begin with, I think it is a good idea because it allows him to visualize the correct spelling of certain words so he can kind of familiarize himself with the proper spelling. And the last strategy that I implemented throughout this study, and I think can be beneficial, however, I'm hoping will be less and less, is the idea of breaking down writing. The student at the beginning expressed to me that large scale writing was very overwhelming for him when he was presented multiple times with large scale writing, such as writing an essay, a DBQ, or a large paragraph. He would become very overwhelmed, and many times me or his teacher was not receiving anything. He would stare at the paper and not write much of anything. So I think that overall, to begin with, it's good for him to slowly adapt, and maybe as I continue or as his teacher continues, increasing the amount of writing we're expecting slowly so it's less and less intimidating rather than full scale making him jump into a large writing piece can be beneficial for him. And I think that was good for him to start off this way to slowly work himself into that idea of writing more and more and creating the proper punctuation, grammar, spelling, and all the things that he's kind of needing improvement on. So I was able to use a couple references that helped me find some strategies that I could use for my student, such as the strategy of proofreading. I think that was really beneficial for my student, and I've seen great success so far with that. And the other one was the idea of vocabulary quizzes. I think that vocabulary quiz did help improve that student's vocabulary terms and the spelling for these terms and the meaning for them, which within his writing, it's also very important for him to ensure he's using proper terminology. So overall, I think that this strategy or this case study was very beneficial for my student. I've seen great success over this short amount of time with him, and I'm excited to see how much further it goes and continue to improve. So yes, thank you so much.